So hello everyone and welcome to our second week in the Tea, Coffee and Code series for March. And just as we've mentioned on the previous sessions, very much live and unscripted. And we're also using the GoToMeeting webinar, or GoToMeeting interface here, so we can have a live chat flowing along at the same time. So if you're watching this on demand, then sorry, you won't be able to see that, but we've got a bunch of webcams on, a number of smiling people looking at us, and an interesting topic or so to kind of gather through for the next half hour. So webcams are completely optional, but it is really nice to actually be able to see people's faces when we are still struggling to be able to kind of get out and kind of catch up in person. So joining me today is Ian Barker, who's one of our MVPs. Good morning or good afternoon. Well, good morning, afternoon to me. Good morning to you, because you're over in the US, aren't you? So.
Well, luckily, as you can tell from my British accent, I'm used to having weird time zones thrown at me. It is currently 8:03 a.m. here in Texas, so yeah, it's a little bit early. Holger and I are gradually knocking back the coffee to wake up a bit. I guess you guys are all having lunch or something. So.
Yeah, and also, yeah, good morning to Holger as well.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, it's well, it's 9 o'clock now, so I shouldn't complain.
He's an hour ahead of me, just to confuse everybody.
So for those of who are watching who may not have bumped into you guys before, do you want to just give yourselves a quick 30-second introduction? So Ian?
You want to go first, Holger? Oh, I'll go first. Okay. Well, I'm sure a few people have heard of me nowadays. I seem to be everywhere on Embarcadero websites and streaming and all sorts of horrible things. My name's Ian Barker. As you can tell from my accent, I'm originally from the UK, born and bred in London, despite the home county's accent. But I live now in Dallas in Texas. I'm an Embarcadero MVP. I've programmed with Delphi since literally the very first day it came out, and you'll see me streaming at various places. I have a website as well, code.show.com, talking about Delphi. I get up every day and I write Delphi code, and I go to sleep thinking about Delphi code. That's what I do. I'm not any different from anybody else. I just happen to have done it a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth. So I know exactly what your pain is. All the happy faces out on the webcam was there.
So Ian's very much a UI geek. He's done a few really good sessions. So that's why he's on with us today. And we've got a few links to share with those sessions kind of at the end as well. So if you want to kind of delve into some more deeper dives into areas. So Holger, do you want to say a quick hello?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm also a Embarcadero MVP, originally from Germany, moved to the US a couple of years ago, and have been using Delphi since 1996, so Delphi 2. Been with Delphi for a long time, and also right now I've become an evangelist for TMS software, and that's also why you guys thought of me today, because I obviously have a lot of exposure to user interface controls and might be able to give some insights if you want to go multi-platform, cross-framework, to give some insights what's available with Delphi there.
Okay, super. So, so just a quick reminder, the format, we're aiming for around about half an hour. I think we might run over a little bit on today's topic because there's quite a bit to talk around. But you're happy for you to stay as long as you can. The replays will be posted up onto the Embarcadero YouTube channel. There's a bit.ly there for the Tea, Coffee and Code replays, which will help you kind of get directly to the, oh, mouse is going mental.
Yeah, it is live, everybody.
It is live. I'm going to turn my mouse off because I think the battery might have just gone on my mouse, which is why it's just gone absolutely haywire. So yeah, the replays on the YouTube channel. There's a kind of like a sub channel there just for the Tea, Coffee and Code replays. So.
Jim described this as the espresso version.
Yes, well, espresso or the express code. I'm not quite sure. It's.
Okay. So, yeah, Jim's was 2 hours, and it was a long 2 hours.
Yeah, that's a bit too much for a coffee break. You need some sandwiches with that one. So
you're working in the wrong outfits.
So Ian, I know you kind of put this together as a quick introduction. Do you want to just take us through where you're kind of going with this?
Yeah, when we were talking about this this webinar, we were sort of discussing what we would talk about, and since then, obviously, we talked to Holger as well, because Holger's main thing to talk about really are how TMS controls fit into user interface design and things like that. Mine is slightly more esoteric and slightly more theoretical, I suppose. So we're talking about skeuomorphism and neomorphism, Fluent UI and Project U Reunion. There are some links that we're going to put up to some blog posts which go into a lot more depth, because I think if we use lots of words with morphism in it, everybody will suddenly disappear from the little array of webcams that we've got here pointing at us. Skeuomorphism is, if you're not aware of this, it's when we used to have things that looked like real objects but were applications. If you remember all the Lotus notebooks where they had tabs down the side, or the notepads that actually looked like ruled pieces of paper, that was skeuomorphism. It was stuff that was trying to emulate the real world. In fact, the very first versions of Amiga OS, if you remember those, they had all those kind of controls. It's a great visual metaphor, but it's very much considered a dated metaphor. Then we went to a lot of things that were flatter, and they had what's known as less affordance. In other words, you didn't necessarily know that you could click on things. You found out through hints that might be that the text is bold or underlined or something like that. And the latest trend really is to go towards something called neomorphism, and we'll show some examples of that in a moment. Neomorphism is those kind of controls where they tend to be quite white or light, and the way that the controls are highlighted and made to be 3D to jump off the page, or where they've got the shades of the main color to highlight them and add the shadows. I think what happened was that a lot of people they made everything so flat to go for things like Xbox and stuff like that, where you had less capabilities of pre-designed controls. That people started to think, well, I want to make it so that it's more obvious that my controls are clickable, but also to give it some depth, some dimension to it. And so neomorphism is all about that. Fluent UI is the flat thing that you're all familiar with Windows 10, where it tends to use one font, which is the Seago UI font. But also uses this idea of movement and depth, which if you go to the blog link that we'll show in a moment, there's a whole webinar about that. I did one called How to Terrify Your Users and Look Cool at Parties. It was very popular. And all talks all about these long words, neomorphism, Fluent UI. Project Reunion, also known as UI3, is Microsoft's even newer push beyond Fluent UI. So Fluent UI's got that lovely what do they call it? The acrylic semi-transparent or semi-transparent areas of the screen that show through. You all know what that is. Go and look at the videos and you'll see if you're not sure. Project Reunion takes some of those controls that were really intended for .NET applications and things like that, and basically tries to join everything back together again, because it was originally introduced, Fluent UI was originally introduced for Xbox and gaming platforms and stuff like that. And they had the phone. We all remember the phone, right? The Microsoft phone that lots of people loved, but never really went anywhere for whatever reasons. That was the push for Windows 10, really. The impetus was to go towards tablets, to go towards mobile devices, and to simplify the controls, because those devices and the Xboxes and all the other machines were not really capable of having the same oomph behind them that your average desktop or laptop would have. Project Reunion, someone says, what, a Microsoft phone? How old do you think we are? You're Delphi people. I'm gonna bet there's a big proportion of you that are quite old. But yeah, Project Reunion. Say that again.
I said careful there.
Yes, yeah. They're far away. They can't get me. I'm fine. If I go back to England, I'll pretend to be someone else. But anyway, the Project Reunion is Microsoft's new push on that. And again, there's a link in a moment to go to that website. It's trying to unify all of those platforms. It's a second go. In fact, really, it's a third go at trying to get some controls. Now, why do we care as Delphi programmers? Well, obviously we care because that's our operating system, mostly Windows. Yes, Linux is part of that, and in fact, Windows is incorporating WSL2 and things like that, the Windows system for Linux. But we do care because eventually our applications have got to look like they belong. So they've got to look like they are using the same controls as other applications. Otherwise, you're just going to stand out like a sore thumb, and everybody's going to go, "Oh, I don't want to use that application. It looks really dated." So there will be the UI3 controls in the VCL, which is what I've heard Marco say publicly, so I think I can repeat it. But if you go to the Project Reunion website for Microsoft, you'll see that they're a long way off it. They did a demo recently of their controls. It was not a good demo. It's, I think, not unfair for me to say they've got a lot of work to do on those controls, but the full weight of Microsoft is behind this project, which means it is going to happen for sure. And because of that, Embarcadero are keeping a very close eye on what's going on. Now, we know with VCL already, you know, we incorporate a lot of those new bells and whistles. We can do notifications on multiple platforms. You can have VCL controls that can look native on Windows and fit in. So the march will be in a year's time when Project Reunion has got a little bit more stable and a little more joined up. Then obviously Marco and David and people like that have said that they obviously want to support this. I think that's enough from me for now, but that's what we're really talking about.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting area to kind of keep an eye on. There's always a number of things that are tried out and tested out, and certainly, you know, one of the big parts of Project Reunion is seeing there's a much deeper look back at the traditional Windows APIs and getting native controls really, rather than using other controls that are trying to be wrapped up and then provided back to the native layers in some way, which is kind of cool. So I know we spoke a little bit about the skeuomorphism and the neomorphism, the flat design part. We just found a few images just to kind of give a pictorial view of what that kind of looks like. So just going back as a reminder, you know, looking at how the graphical user interfaces looked like the real world kind of calculator, and then went very flat, and then have moved into this kind of white kind of design, kind of bland design. Which, I mean, certainly looking at it on my monitor here, it's so much harder to see the white layout and how to work with that than some of the early ones.
I think part of the problem there is that it's the resolution as well, because we're going towards much higher resolution. I mean, most people now have got a minimum 1920 resolution, full HD. They're getting better quality monitors, and yes, it's not as obvious on a screenshot like that, but I think when you've actually got the controls in front of you, you can see them more easily. But I would say that it is visually it's pretty, but it's not necessarily going to be the thing that people. I think the middle calculator looks the best, in my opinion.
Yeah. So
agreed.
Do you want to give us a little bit of insight in terms of, you know, like different controls and the evolution, and how, you know, TMS are helping kind of developers keep up and change around?
Yeah, I think it's no secret to say that with Delphi and Windows Desktop, the VCL is still the framework that I would say most Delphi developers use. So I'm not even going to go into depth there, because everybody knows that TMS has a huge palette of VCL controls that are designed to make you not reinvent the wheel over and over again. So there's a multitude of grid controls. There's toolbars. There's even a toolbar that can be, with a toggle of a property, becomes from a toolbar, it switches over to a ribbon. And all these things that we've seen from other third-party as well, with different other controls. I think the key things that have been shown in the recent years is, number one, that there has been control, or components, I should say, because they're now visual, to style your applications quickly, meaning you drop a control on your form and then you run your application. And I've seen it myself a couple of days ago with a customer. You run this application on Windows 10, it looks completely different if you deploy it to a Windows Server operating system, for example, or to a even another build of Windows 10 has subtle differences when it comes to colors and what everything looks like. So this is where TMS has done a great job. They have controls that are stylable, they call it. And I really want to separate that from Embarcadero uses the term style, what I consider theme, when something is made to look a certain way, like you have like these one, which I like as well. But for me, it's a different kind of thing. If you want to make your Windows 10 application look like a media player, and you have like these different user interface things, I like that as well. But it's really designed to make your applications look, as Ian put it so nicely, look the correct way on each operating system. The second big thing that Ian hasn't mentioned in particular yet, but I would be interested how many people here that are listening in right now are affected by it, is high DPI. He said like the resolution goes up. Not only does the resolution and dimensions of our displays go up, the pixel density becomes smaller, meaning like I recently bought a laptop and my Windows settings say 400%. That means like if you run a old application that has been compiled with Delphi 7, for example, all the 16 times 16 images are a quarter of that size, you know, and that is what Embarcadero built, modernized the VCL to cope with that. Microsoft needed a couple of tries to decide which kind of way they're going to go. And with that in place, TMS was able to make their controls high DPI capable, meaning that you as the developer have very little to do, that your application looks the same way on each different density. Of course, you still have to do some work if you want to support it. One of those things, and this is where we go back to user interface, is the capability to use vector images, because Embarcadero provided with, I think it was introduced in Delphi Rio, they introduced a new image list control that automatically creates images in the right size that you need them, and it is only logical to expand that using Embarcadero classes that are part of the VCL to basically make it possible to use vector images for that. So what happens internally is, if you have a toolbar, just to give very brief introduction to the high DPI problem, if you have a toolbar and you have a standard display that works at 96 DPI, Windows calls it 100%, and you put 32 pixel images on this toolbar, if you run it on a display that has 200% in its settings, these images actually have to be rendered twice the size, meaning 64 pixels. And if you only have 32 pixel images as resources in your application, your glyphs get pixelated pretty quickly. And this is exactly the reason why vector images make a huge difference, because they can be scaled any size you want. And as said, Embarcadero, I want to point this out because Embarcadero did a great job providing classes to support this. So a lot of people always say, oh, there haven't been new controls in the latest Delphi versions, but these are the kind of things they did. They're not as visible, I would say, but it still was a lot of work. And it especially gives third-party developers the ability to inherit from those classes to incorporate their own technologies into that. And finally, another thing about user interfaces is, and I'm quite sure Ian or Stephen will be focusing on that as well. Another great thing about Delphi nowadays is you have multi-platform compilation to mobile platforms, and you have with FireMonkey also Mac OS, and with FMX Linux you also have Ian's birds are going berserk. You have.
They're the other side of the door shut. That's how loud they are.
Yeah.
This microphone picks them up.
Yeah. You also have Linux for user interfaces, and this is where TMS has an innovation that is hugely misunderstood because people think it's a new framework or something. It's called FNC, meaning framework neutral controls. And that means you can use these control with any of the frameworks that Delphi provides, meaning you have a toolbar control that you can drop in a VCL application, you can drop it in a FireMonkey application, and with TMS, you can also drop it in a web application that they provide with their web tool, TMS Web Core. And the key is that these controls, they also have non-visual controls, so components have the same properties, methods, and events on all frameworks. Meaning, if you, simple example, if you change the font in the VCL, it works completely different in FireMonkey. And with these controls, you do it the same way in all the frameworks. And the nice thing is that because these controls are available for FireMonkey and the VCL and the web, you can really do true cross-framework, cross-platform development with them. And the amount of controls, that's what I would say what the focus is on right now, is being expanded on a regular basis. Like you have a tree view toolbar, you have a grid. They also provide you with a T data source implementation. So you have in FireMonkey something that you're used to from the VCL. You have client data sets and a T data source and don't need to use live bindings, which makes it very much easier to, if you have existing applications in the VCL, using the same data model. So these things all in mind, we can focus on those if there are specific questions for like multi-platform or cross-platform development.
So I think
I'm sorry, I muted myself so that my birds wouldn't tweet all over. They're actually very far away, by the way. I just have a lot of them. If you get two parakeets, budgies in England, keep them apart because otherwise you'll end up with 15. Like, this is what happened to me. Sorry, you carry on then. I was going to mention.
What I was going to say is, I think
about
what Holger's basically been saying there is that one of the really powerful things around the component designs that we have is that it's expandable, and we can it gives the option for third-party tooling companies like TMS to put together some really powerful stuff to work across multiple platforms. But also, you mentioned the thing about being able to change the look and feel from a switch of a flick in the controls. And certainly, I know the controls that I've used in the past from TMS have had a number of different themes and styles built into them that's very easy to switch between one and the other, to kind of keep up with the UI trends. So when you've got the UI, go on ahead.
Funny you should mention this. I've just literally yesterday finished a project with over 500 forms in it, and we use TMS controls in there quite heavily. And it used to have a custom color scheme where someone had hard coded a set of colors and there was a routine to apply them, but it was written before the Delphi styles were sort of good enough, shall we say, or in a position where the company wanted to use it. And my project for the week was to take all of those forms, undo all the custom coloring, and literally get it to use CL window and CL button face, all the standard colors, and then apply a bunch of themes. And of course, we've got a little drop down that lists the themes that are available. You just go into the VCL app and say, I want all these themes. And I actually use some from DelphiStyles.com. But it was one line of code to enable it to have themes. It was just magical. So the guy who I was demonstrating to said, so this is one line of code. What took you so long? I said, I undid all the hard stuff, all the stuff where it was all custom colored. But in there, we do have a number of TMS controls that have got, and someone else is mentioning Developer Express or Dev Express.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, this is not a TMS only thing. Obviously, there are other people out there. We just happen to have a TMS person with us today. But with the TMS controls on this project, we were using a T-styler, which is what Holger was mentioning. It's a T-styler component that it's a bit like a style book, I suppose, in Delphi, except it's for the TMS controls, and it has a panel styler and a few other things as well. But you can set that set of appearances for the particular controls, say these specific panels, and then they inherit them. It's a bit like in 10.42 where you can have per control styling. I don't know if people are familiar with this, but one of the changes in Delphi 10.42 is you could actually have independent styles. So one form would have one style and another form could have another style. I don't know why you want to do that, but you could have a dark style on one form and a light style on another and a bright green one on another.
It was more getting down to the per user control, because there are instances where people have third-party controls who aren't
calendars are very
who aren't kind of necessarily kind of connected up to work in the right way with styles. So having the one control makes really stand out. So being able to have a per control style and override the style for specific controls then actually made those controls fall back into the kind of the design patterns and stuff that people are using to make them look pretty. So.
Yeah. And we didn't really mention, but web core is the big thing, I think, from TMS that makes a big difference. We had a project just recently where we did some comparative research for Embarcadero, where they took a calculator app, the Windows 10 calculator app. They actually paid some contractors, so they say, but some contractors to do a version in Electron, as an Electron app, a version in .NET, and then they got some MVPs, of which I was one of them, to do some VCL and some FMX versions. Now, I said, okay, yeah, I'll do the VCL version, that's fine. So I did the idea was to try and basically emulate the Windows 10 calculator, which has got a fluent UI interface, as you're all aware. We did the VCL app, but I wrote it in such a way that because the user interface was divorced from the actual logic, I could then redo the same application using our media dev style controls, which are some fluent UI controls. That took me about another 2 hours on top of that. And then I could do the same thing again for FMX, and also then do the same thing for TMS Web Core. Once I did the Web Core app, which was just a web page that looks like the Windows 10 calculator and functions the same, with one change, I could rebuild the project and produce an Electron app from the TMS Web Core code without any changes to code whatsoever, and then do the same thing and say to it, now it's a progressive web app. So with one set of Delphi code, I could target VCL, FMX, and then FMX Linux and all the others, a fluent UI interface, a real fluent UI interface as well, with proper transparency and acrylic on it, a proper web page that's served up via any web server with HTML and JavaScript working in the background in CSS, a progressive web app that could be downloaded and run offline, and an Electron app, all with one set of code. The contractors, they were still doing it right after we'd finished the project because it took them a lot more time. The power of Delphi here is the code reuse and the fact that it's a component ecosystem that we belong to, not just the fact it's Delphi, it's the fact that the component development is so powerful. There's so many component vendors out there, and stuff like WebCore, it supercharges you as a developer, and that's something that's important.
And I hope I pointed it out enough, like, because you said like, oh, this is TMS. The reason why TMS is able to do that, and credits to Embarcadero, is they provide the base classes. I mean, the high DPI stuff gives you really the opportunity, if you wanted to, like if you work in the industry and have your own image formats, you could use that and build on top of that. That's exactly what TMS did. They built their vector image list collection. They built that on top of what Embarcadero provides. And the same with the styles. There is the specific TMS styling, which has existed since, I would say, Delphi 7 or 5. And but you can also use the Embarcadero specific styling, which Ian just mentioned, that you download a style from, what was the page, Delphi styles.
And styles.com, or one of the, you can go into Get It and you can get some
there's
styles.
a whole load in Get It nowadays as well.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
DelphiStars.com is run by I think it's Alexi, who also does the Our Media Dev controls. That's how I got introduced to it.
And that is I think what we should always or point out is, because Delphi is criticized sometimes because like, oh, there is a new release and I don't have any new, because these days I think those days are over, where you had like a Delphi 2 which had certain controls, and then Delphi 3 had something new, and Delphi 4 had the action lists and all that kind of stuff, and the action bands. And I think you can't judge a new Delphi version as good or bad by the amount of new VCL controls as we did like in the early days. These times you really have to, I mean, just recently I had a project where I needed to look at some hardware programming, and the Delphi runtime library has also been upgraded. So all your user interfaces, like I got the direct comparison from customer had Delphi 7, we recompiled it in the latest Delphi version, and the user interfaces, without changing a single line of code, look different, because Delphi obviously nowadays uses the different set of the Windows API, and all these updates or upgrades are not that visible for us, but they're very, very important for your applications to run on a multitude of target systems. I have, because of college, and everybody in college wanted me to use .NET and Java. Not a nice time to remember because of that. But the main thing is that if I wrote something in .NET, and it's really not exaggerated, like after 2-3 months, you had to basically relearn and look at the new things that were current then. At the time, like Microsoft was doing like their own database support with Entity Framework and ASP.NET, and they changed it so often that you really were always trying to play catch up. And since '96, I never had that big kind of feeling that I had with .NET almost every 3 months. I didn't have that with Delphi ever. Of course, there was Unicode and all these things that required some major changes, but still Delphi updates things without us noticing. And that's what I always say, like it is kind of sad that people sometimes say, oh, Delphi doesn't have any new innovation when it comes to UI, it's still the VCL. Well, the VCL has been changed so that you as the developer don't need to care. You know, if Embarcadero asks you, oh, you have to replace the T button now with the TUI 3 button, you would say like, oh, that's a lot of work. Yeah, it would be a lot of work. But if Embarcadero does for you the work in the class work, in the source code, and that's exactly what's happening. So I think Ian will agree wholeheartedly with me that most of the changes that Delphi gets, we as a developer don't even notice, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's the in some ways that's the biggest problem that Delphi has, that so many things are happening behind the scenes that are I'll tell you a good example of how things happen to Delphi that you don't even notice, you take for granted, and somewhere in Embarcadero there's a compiler engineer going, oh, how can you not know I did such wonderful work? But you can take Delphi programs and you can put them on a thumb drive, a USB stick, whatever you want to call it, a USB memory stick. You can copy your executable, your .exe, onto that stick. You can go up to a Windows 10 PC, plug it in, and run it from that memory stick, and it will run. It doesn't want to download 1.2 gigabytes of .NET runtime that you don't have. It doesn't want you to add anything else unless you've got some kind of DLL that you need DB connectivity for. But it will run off that memory stick. Take the same memory stick out, hopefully without it having a virus on it, and go and take it over to a Windows 7 PC, even though it's not supported, and you will find that 99% of your application will run absolutely fine. You can take it, if it's a Delphi 7 app, for example. I know a lot of people out there using Delphi 7. Do the same thing, plug it into a Windows XP machine, run that application, just that executable off the thumb drive, and it will run. No extra runtimes, no nothing else. As long as you haven't used runtime packages, it will run on all the operating systems that you can come across. Someone's done a lot of hard work in there to make that application keep working in the background. You cannot do that with the .NET app. They keep saying, oh yeah, I can write this .NET app and I can make it run on this and I can make it run on that. 99% of the problems I have with user interfaces not looking right or the application not working right is because it's a .NET app. It's been taken to a 2021 version of a Windows Server. It doesn't have all the right packages installed and all the right .NET runtimes, even though, you know, it will download a lot of these things automatically. The thing just doesn't work. And it's almost impossible to understand why it doesn't work. Then when it does work, it looks completely different from the version that's running over there on your friend's machine that is a Windows 10 desktop PC instead of a server PC. This is a horrible trend that's happening with things like, you know, these .NET apps. And the same happens with Electron. Everybody says, oh, it's the universal panacea. I can design my application in Electron and I can do it all in Node.js or some other you know, framework. I can do all the CSS, I can do all the web, and it will look the same every time. Every time I go to each operating system, I can run this Electron app. They can just hit and it'll auto update. But the problem is, as that Electron app runs, it will consume 1 GB of RAM to just show some simple little screens. And that's not an exaggeration. You look at Slack, you look at all the other applications which aren't really that complicated. They are eating RAM. Why? Why are they doing that? It's just a set of browser pages. It's because the Electron app is behind the scenes there. Your same app that's a Delphi app that does all the same displays and will run on all those operating systems. If it's a VCL, it's going to be Windows, but if it's FMX, then it could be FMX Linux, it could be a Macintosh, it could be you know, different versions of Windows. That app will run and it will not consume massive amounts of RAM. It's actually very lean, I suppose is the word I'm looking for that user interface.
Yeah, and I know we talk about user interface. Sorry, Steve, I just want to, because I want to give Embarcadero some creds here. The number one thing that has not been promoted that much from the last Delphi release was you have database applications, and as you know, if you connect to a database, most of the time you need specific libraries, DLLs, to connect to those databases. And one of the Fire Deck improvements was that for some databases, it's possible to, when you compile your application, that these client libraries will become part of your executable. And it hasn't been promoted much, but then you're back to, hey, I just have my executable and it still connects to this and that database without any additional library. And these tiny little things make a huge difference when it comes to, for example, when you build web services with Delphi that connect to databases. If you have to deploy a certain database client first and your web service, it's already one more step, more time than just copying an executable to your web server, and then you have your running web service. You know, and these are the tiny little differences. That is one line in the new features list that's get totally under appreciated. You know.
I'm laughing at the comments where people are complaining about Electron, and I said friends don't let friends use Electron, and there's like everyone's going, yeah, I totally agree.
Okay, guys, I know we're kind of running a little bit over time in terms of where we're trying to aim for. We've still got quite a few people on with us, which is nice. So what I want to do is just kind of a couple of the questions that were sent through beforehand, which you've got up on the screen here. I'm just going to pick a couple of them off here for a kind of a Twitter-size answer, if we can go for that. So let's go.
You know it's me, right? I don't.
Yeah, I know. So I will have to find my mute button and cut you off after 30 seconds. So should I use a graphic designer to help me with designing my UI?
If you can afford one, yes, every time.
Yeah.
Especially for web design. Yes.
Brilliant.
And TMS Web allows you to basically mix your development, you're the developer, perfect, and web design. If a professional does it, you can merge this very easily, so you get best user interface if you really get a specialist.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
I
agree.
think one of the nice things about being able to prototype quickly and get that initial feedback and then come back, iterate it through, is you can start working out how the design and the flow works quite nicely, which is kind of cool.
Go to Fiverr.com and pay a small amount of money, and you'll save yourself a fortune and get someone who's probably better than you are at designing user interfaces. That's fact.
Okay. And the last question here, because I think a lot of these have been kind of covered through the session today one way or another. Should you design mobile first for new applications?
No. This is, I mean, I'll let Holger answer as well, but this is a big fallacy, and I think people are more recognizing this. Mobile first is it's flawed thinking, because if you are designing a mobile app which you are going to then convert to be a desktop app, or designing a desktop app which you say, oh, we can make a mobile version of it, this is like talking about cake and beer. You know, they're both things that you can consume, but they have slightly different intended purposes. You know, you have cake and it makes you get fat, and you drink a beer and if you have too much, it makes you get fat if you do it wrong. The mobile app should be like cake and beer, says Rob. See, I knew I'd find the right level here. The mobile app should be lean and aimed at solving specific problems that you want to, a specific purpose, should I say, for the mobile app. The desktop app has a similar purpose, but probably a different way of doing it, more expansive controls. They should not be, let's design a mobile app and then come up with some reason why we should have it desktop. I think desktop first, we had a whole conference about it, desktopfirst.com.
Yeah, it was a great conference,
you know,
a lot of good sessions on that. So Holger,
yeah, I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I did 2 sessions there too.
Yeah, I'll make it short. Just take one example, master detail. You have 2 grids, and you have on mobile a completely different approach. Then you don't want to switch windows and forms when you look up the list of invoices for a customer on the desktop. But on a mobile device, you don't have a choice. You click on the customer and then you get the list of invoices. And because of that, what Ian said, like, it's 2 completely different approaches. So in my opinion, the user needs to be guided for a specific purpose on mobile or tablet, and a desktop app can be totally different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
I agree with Ian.
It's one of those things that it's definitely worth kind of thinking about what you need to be able to take to mobile when you're pushing things through, and you can use that certainly in the design of your architecture to make sure things are right. And it certainly brings to the 4 things like, you know, model view, view model, and model view control, different kind of design patterns to be able to pick up the data and show it then to the UI. It's definitely the way to go with that.
This is how I design mobile screens. This is like an index card, and it's basically the same size as my mobile phone, thereabouts. And when I'm going to design it, the first thing I do, if I'm sitting down with someone who's paying me to design it, we'll sketch it out on one of those. Now, you can't do that with the desktop app, because desktop app is like that. And it's also should be A4, I suppose, for Europe or US letter size. You're going to fit a lot more on, but that's your mobile app. That's how to design it. Simple as that. Wireframe things as well.
Okay, guys.
Focus on the important stuff, because Delphi developers, because they're so used to having grids, and that's actually, I don't, the first thing a lot of people wonder, oh, we need this grid in my mobile app. And I say, like, how many apps do you have on your phone that actually have a grid, you know? And it's a different kind of thinking, as Ian said, like, focus on one task and think about how other companies do it and why you like it. You know, you don't have on, let's take the iPhone or the Android phone, you don't have one app like Outlook, mail, calendar, contacts. No, on the mobile device, it's a contacts app, a mail app, and a calendar app. So if you have an application that is on the desktop and does 1,000 things, it's probably more than one mobile application.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll carry on through here. I know we've kind of we're an extra 15 minutes on from where we were. I see Ian's already been busy copying some of these links down. We'll make sure they're up on the blog page that was sent around to everybody on the confirmation emails earlier today, on the Embarcadero blogs page. Yeah, I'd definitely say if you want to delve into deeper into some of the bits. The 3 really good sessions, and I think the how to terrify users and look cool at parties. It's kind of it's one of those
very
weird
popular
titles,
session.
but yeah, there's a good session in there to kind of look at how some of the different bits work through and kind of expand on further from the bits that were spoken about earlier.
Last week's session was called Dating Tips for Programmers.
Take of that what you will. I don't know where to go on that one.
I'm going to write a blog post about it. You'll have to see the session to see what I'm talking about.
Okay. Just a couple of quick news items. Obviously, we're just running up to the end of our fiscal year at Embarcadero. So there's some pretty nice offers running at the moment. So if you're needing to get any extra licenses, now is definitely the time to go and have a chat with local Embarcadero reps. If you have a current version update subscription, then you can go to my.embarcadero.com to download the latest version of 10.4.2 with the latest parts that are there. Otherwise you can just go ahead and download a trial if you want to get onto the latest bits and test your code on the latest versions. Next week, I'm not sure if I've bitten off more than I can chew on this one yet, but we'll certainly have a good go at this. I spent obviously a couple of years away from Embarcadero running some of the IoT global network planning side of things at Nokia. And I thought it'd be really interesting to have a conversation and a discussion topic looking into how data is being used, how IoT is kind of impacting that, how some of the different kind of technologies that are being used by different people in areas to work through that, some of the different architectural setups and everything. So, and also kind of there's a few things that we've got at Embarcadero which are quite cool, kind of linking into this space. Things like change views from Interbase and so on. So we'll dive into some of that kind of stuff next week, looking at IoT and data. So I think that's pretty much it from us. Oh, one other news topic which I forgot to put a slide on here. If you go to the Embarcadero blogs, blogs.embarcadero.com, I posted up this week a single page printout that you can do of the key shortcut keys within RAD Studio. Quite a handy little thing to have to the side. I know most of us have probably got them ingrained into our fingers now, but we had a couple of new users who I was chatting with, and they're finding it a little bit hard to get through all the stuff on the doc wiki with it. So we've done a nice grouped together, printout for that. Which
if you're quick enough, if you're quick enough, I don't know if you've seen it. The blogs page from Embarcadero has this auto slide in there, and as soon as you mentioned like go to the keystroke thingy, it went away. So you have to be quick, or you have to like when it goes away,
you can drag it back.
Two other. Oh, you can drag? Okay.
Yeah, you can drag it back. Yeah.
Okay, good. But because it vanishes pretty quickly.
You may have to do an entire session on cakes and beer next time as well.
There seems an awful lot of cake and beer chat. It's a shame. I don't know. We've got Jens in here. He brews his own. That's certainly quite nice. Just over a year ago, before we had COVID. Hey, hi Jens. We all had the COVID lockdowns. The last time that I was out the country, and the last event I did was actually in Denmark, and we sat having a couple of his homebrewed beers afterwards, which was
quite stop nice. It! It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much to Holger and to Ian for joining us today. Thank you very much for the chat that's been going on and flowing through this. If you're watching this on replay, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to see the full chat set up, but get on live next time and join us for the chat. So thanks very much everyone for joining us, and see you again next week.
Bye everybody.
Cheers everyone. Bye bye.